You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one-on-one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1288. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice that you absolutely love. We want to have that thriving side, the operations, the marketing, the networking, all those things that it takes to run a practice, but we also want to have the side of you loving it. You don't have to build a business that you feel icky about and that you just don't stand behind. It can have your own values, your own perspective, your own way of making the world better. We can see the clients we want to see. We don't have to just see the folks that we think that maybe our grad school advisors would have told us that we needed to see. So we are here to encourage you 5 days a week to have really interesting guests on the show from all different perspectives. And, you know, when I think back to my early days of starting mental wellness counseling before I sold that in 2019, even actually before that, I knew public speaking was something that was going to move me forward in a way that other things couldn't. And so even when I was in graduate school, I was looking for opportunities to do public speaking, to speak at different lunch and learns. There was a psychiatrist inpatient residential unit place in Grand Rapids, Michigan that would do these lunch and learns once a month. And I went there and there were all these great speakers every single month. And I went up to the conference planner and I said to her, you know I'm newer in this, I'm down in Kalamazoo and, I come up once a month for it. If you ever have someone that last minute just cancels, here's my cell phone number. Literally day of, I will drive up to do a lunch and learn with you guys. And the next month, their person that they had came down. They were super sick. She texted me at like 5 a.m, and I responded to it. And I ended up doing a whole experiential approaches to therapy. So like team building types of things with this group. They loved it so much, they brought me back the next year. See, sometimes it's about saying yes to opportunities or even just putting our neck out there and saying, hey, if you ever need help, I would love to help you. But there was a skill set there that I already had in regards to public speaking, where I had, read books. I had learned from people. I hadn't hired coaches like our guest today, but I was trying to get better at the craft of just how do you tell stories? How do you weave in good information and not have it feel like a death by PowerPoint type of situation? Which is why I am so excited to have Kabie Stein with me today. Kabie is the founder and creative director of Hearsay Storytelling, a Traverse City-based live storytelling show that takes place monthly in the winter and spring months. Kabie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. Good to be here.
Yeah, we're in improv together. I've come to Hearsay a ton of times. It's just one of those community events that I feel like we can rely on it in those cold winter months. And it just starts conversations that maybe people don't usually have. I want to go back to when you first started Hearsay. Why'd you start it?
It was something that I wanted to exist. I was relatively new to town. I didn't know anybody when I moved here. And I just was thinking I want to meet more people. How am I going to meet the writers and the people who I might have things in common with? And it was just something that was knocking around the back of my head for a long time. And then when I knew enough people, I actually would just approach people and say hey, doesn't this sound like a cool thing to exist here in Traverse? And the person would say, yeah. And then I would say, cool, you should start it. And then enough people were like, no, that's not really in my plans. I was like, okay, I'll do it. It was something that I wanted to exist. I had my experience in live event programming was just from grad school, where I had, a the pool of people at the ready to just say, hey, come read your fiction. So yeah, I just said, all right, I'll start it and I will figure it out as I go.
Yeah, and why storytelling? Why was that where you landed on the focus?
You know, it can be really, I mean, microphones can be scary or whatever, but I just feel like people want to tell their stories. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. And how better than, instead of saying like, here's this thing that I like, this thing I invented, I think it's a lot easier for people to get up and say, this is something I experienced.
Yeah, I remember it was in one of Carmen Gallo's books. I don't remember if it was Talk Like Ted or The Storyteller's Secret. And he talked about neuromirroring and when people tell a story, how our brains actually mirror each other. And that it's like this primitive thing where, the thing that it took to survive was sitting around a fire and hearing where are the tigers and like where is the antelope, like where's the danger and where's the food. And that our brains are just programmed to mirror other people when they're telling a story. And to me, that's just fascinating that one of the best ways to just create empathy and connection is people telling stories. When you think about just some of the stories that you've heard, maybe what's one of them? And obviously we could probably spend hours just talking through our own stories or other people's stories. But like, is there one or two that just stand out to you? Like, yeah, my neural mirroring was with them, and you're just like, I can't believe this is the event that I'm hosting.
Yeah, there's two stories that really stick out for me, as far as how the audience responded, and then also just how it hit me. Before the pandemic, there was a story of this woman had arm wrestle. She had on a lark, like entered an arm wrestling competition at the Ohio Lesbian Festival. She was there with her wife, and her wife just said, "Hey, you should do that." And she said, "Okay." She wasn't really, that wasn't something she did before. And so she comes in and just one by one just takes out the competition and then is crowned the Ohio Lesbian Festival arm wrestling champion. And the audience response, because every time she told the part where she took down another competitor, like the audience was just so into it. They were really getting pulled in. And one of the best parts was that there was somebody in the audience who was like especially into it. Like when she said she won, like he yelled out, like F yeah, like really loud. And it turned out, we later found out that his cousin or his aunt had been at that festival and had just watched this and was live blogging what was going on. So he knew the legend before he actually got to hear her tell her story. But I think like what was so like just compelling about that story is that, everyone has that dream where it's just like, you just come in the underdog and then next thing you know, woohoo, you've won it all. Whether or not we've all had that experience, like we should all be so lucky, but to hear it told, just in a way where there's an immediacy, like a really good story pulls you in as if you yourself have a stake in it. As if, like you said, like it's as if it's happening to us, that we care so deeply that it's not just like, oh, how cool, but it's like this emotional big reaction, like, oh my God, that is amazing.
You even think about the movies. You think about like the movies that we all love. It's usually we have someone to root for. We're rooting for Luke Skywalker and the rebellion. And it's like that idea of like a story almost creating in our brains like something that we're for instead of just something we're only against.
Yeah. Or just something we're just passively taking in, we're in it. On the flip side, where it wasn't a story necessarily of there's like something great happening, somebody told a story in January of this year. It was about he was hiking in Hawaii with his wife, and it was a long fought for vacation. Finally, they were getting to go on this vacation, And on Christmas Day, they're hiking, and he took a bad step and fell off a cliff. Yeah, and I mean the whole audience, like you just hear like this gasp, like just the air is sucked out of the room, and everyone's like suddenly like so invested in what happens to him. Except that, of course, I mean he's standing before us telling the story very clearly. He survived, but it's still just that like was not expecting that. Because when we go into these shows, I'm the only one who knows what the stories are. So, it's so fun to like for the, the stories of triumph or the stories of tragedy with a positive ending, just to hear the audience just respond to it, this new information. And with this story, again, it was just, he wasn't just telling us what happened. It wasn't a play-by-play. We couldn't go on vacation, and then we could, and then we were hiking, and then I fell, and then I was rescued. I mean, he brought us there as if we were with him. So what happened was actually the reason he survived was there just happened to be a tree growing out of the side of the cliff right where he fell. Like this much to that side, this much to that side. He's not standing before us telling the story.
Wow.
But yeah, it was, I'm getting goosebumps just like telling you about it. But what's so interesting is that, it's not just this is what happened, but this is what was going through my mind. This is what I was experiencing. This is what I know was happening up there. And this is what I know was happening here in the immediate. One of my favorite lines in that story was, he was talking about, this is gross, but he was talking about, how bugs started getting attracted to his wound. And he said that he knew that was a really bad sign, but at the same time, it was really nice to have some company. I just love that line.
So I think sometimes when people think about like a storytelling event, they're like, well, what do I have to say? I think that's something that maybe a lot of people get nervous around. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that when people say that to you?
Well, I don't know. I hope it doesn't come off as unkind, but if somebody says to me, I don't have any stories, I say, that's impossible. I mean, the thing is, like, we all have experiences. The key is you have to believe that it's interesting or that it can be. And I think all stories can be interesting. But the other thing they need to trust is that the audience, that's why they're there. They are there to hear stories. Mm-hmm. And so, nobody, I mean, it is such a welcoming, warm crowd where it's just such an act of generosity to listen to somebody tell their story. And in kind, it's an act of generosity to receive that story. So, so for people who are hesitant, I always want to let them know this is like one of the kindest audiences you will ever find. Mm-hmm. This is not, the social media commentariat. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's like, I've been at events where as people are telling a story, they start to break down, and it's like, you can just feel the audience being like, it's okay. Like, take your time. And it's just like, to know that they're on your side. You said just a second ago, like you can make any story interesting. I'm wondering about, how do you make a mundane story interesting?
Well, one thing that people need to know about telling their stories is that you have to say who you are and what you want. So it's not just, this is what happened to me. It's who you are at the moment this all begins. What is it that you want? What is the wrench in those plans? So the chaos or the upside down. How do you figure it out? And then where does it go from there? I mean, there's a structure, there's something called the story circle where it goes through these 3 acts, the normal that, the thing that flipped it, and then the new normal. So yeah, I mean, so long as something is happening, I think a common mistake that people make in early drafting for storytelling is that they go analytical. It's a thinking piece where like these are my thoughts about this thing that happened rather than this is what happened. And you can get your thoughts in there while you're saying exactly what happened. But if it gets too heavy into the analytical, the immediacy with the audience is kind of lost. Like I would say 9.5 times out of 10 when I see a draft that is more analytical, it's almost, again, it's a beautiful piece of writing, but a piece of writing that was meant to be read, not listened to.
More a term paper.
Exactly.
I want to thank Headway for sponsoring this episode. If you run a group practice, you know that accepting insurance can be overwhelming. Between credentialing, billing, and payroll, the admin side can easily take over your week. Headway was built to help you handle this, and they're the only platform designed specifically for in-network group practices. Whether you're growing your team or running an established practice, Headway makes the business side easier with faster credentialing, higher per-session rates, and bi-weekly payments your team can count on. They work with therapy, psychiatric, and hybrid group practices. There are no subscription fees, just the support you need to run your practice with ease. Run your best group practice with Headway, trusted by thousands of group practice leaders to simplify insurance admin and reach more people through in-network care. Curious how Headway can work for you? Head to join.headway.co/Joe. That's join.headway.co/Joe to learn more. I've found that, we've done this a lot in improv, how much can be said by just explaining details. If I say I got into the Subaru that my parents gave me that was 10 years old and was so rusty that when I went around corners onto a highway, smoke came out of it, that tells you my social status versus I got into my F-150 that my parents gave me brand new on my 16th birthday. Like, there's not a whole lot that has to be said there. And I think that sometimes just those little details of I ate a Dunkin' Donut or I ate overnight oatmeal just tell us who you are just through the details.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for the show that I do, you only have about 10 minutes on stage, and no one story exists in a vacuum. I mean, what I told you about me starting Hearsay, I mean, it goes back even further to like where I came from when I moved to Traverse and, like what I had done so far to try to meet people. But when you have to have an economy of words, you really need to just get right to it with the specific details that, like you say, capture like exactly what you're trying to say without explaining too much.
Yeah.
Like a journey.
How do you find that balance? How do you find that balance between giving details that make it interesting and not over verbalizing?
Yeah, it's really, so I have a background in editing, which I think helps a lot as far as, consolidating and getting to the heart of things. Sometimes, honestly, it's just a matter of flipping the order, where it might seem like it's taking too long to get to where we're going. But if you just flip a couple sentences, then it's like, boom, that's so much more immediate. You really, again, though, you don't want to get too heavy in the description, you mentioned like a beater car, you didn't say a beater car with torn brown seats that this happened and that happened and this and that and this and that. You said it very succinctly. And that's really key because these aren't journeys. This is like a story from a moment in time.
Yeah. Yeah. We're not going through the entire hero's arc. So I'm wondering, imagine there's a therapist right now that's listening and they're supposed to be speaking at a parent-teacher organization about parenting issues, trauma, anxiety, whatever their specialty is. As they're preparing for that talk, how can they think through story and what tips would you give them to say, like, here's the 5 things in prepping for your talk, to pepper some story in there, to have a little Kabie peppered into their story?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very random thing that I came up with as like the litmus. I once got a story where somebody was talking about learning how to sail from their grandfather, and there was this detail in there, and this is a writer, somebody who, writes professionally, so very beautiful literary language. And there was a detail in there about her grandfather's hair, like that his silver hair was like blowing in the breeze. And I said to her, if you were telling me this story while we were sitting at a diner counter eating sandwiches, would you have included that detail? For me, like the eating sandwiches at a counter in the moment felt like the most casual place to be told a story. It's one of those things where you really have to think about, like, what do people need to know, and to keep it casual but polished, because it's really, storytelling is casual, it's conversational. So it needs to be accessible. You don't want, your audience to have to dig through like the Scrabble, 100-point words. I haven't played Scrabble in a while. I don't think you can actually get 100 points on Scrabble, but
man, if you can, I am not playing you. I am bad at Scrabble to begin with.
But yeah, you want it to be accessible, that people know right in the moment what you're saying, without having to like kind of chop through the lofty ideas and the big words. And so, again, like, how would you tell this exact same story in the most casual situation where you can think of, where you're being, you're sitting up straight, you're not slouching, of course, you're polished but conversational.
I love that. What else would you give them as tips as they enter into some presentation for parents and teachers or wherever they're speaking?
Yeah, again, if it's for some kind of an advocacy situation, I would say statistics. And for like, sometimes there's a toggle where there's a speech with a story. If it's just a story, statistics, you kind of, people kind of glaze over. And I think that's why actually storytelling is so much more effective, because, we can tell people all day long, the statistics about, I don't know, I'll say cigarette smoking, because as of this year, I quit 20 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I knew all the statistics. I mean, shame of shames. My mom worked for the Chicago Lung Association. I knew all of it. I knew I shouldn't be doing it. But
that was your act of rebellion.
Yep. Like, I do tell a story about that on my stage from time to time.
It reminds me of this girl in high school whose mom worked for Catholic Family Services as a therapist and was like the head of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And when she went to college, she was like the drunkest of all of them. Like, it was just like that act of rebellion against your parents. So.
Everyone should have one. But yeah, so I knew all the statistics, but they didn't move me, It wasn't until you hear like the stories of like people who smoked and regretted it, or worse. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, it's finding that balance as a professional that, it's not usually just pure storytelling, but then how do you wrap stories and good quality storytelling into these, often, professional types of things to find that balance where it's interesting, but then also that the parents or whoever you're talking to have a good takeaway. I want to shift into, and if we get back into kind of techniques, that's great too. But I want to hear more about putting on events, because it's been really cool to see, at least in the Traverse City area, I've seen some therapists putting on events like these shimmer walks where they're doing like moonlit walks and talking about reducing trauma. And, there's events like yours where people are, telling stories and, really active during Pride Week and other things where it's like giving spotlights to the issues that we care about, and experiences, to go beyond just like listening to a podcast alone on a walk, but to hear someone's story live around other people that are thoughtful, creative people does something to make a robust community. When you think about putting on an event, we can go through the logistical side of it, but I guess what should the posture be as people think about maybe putting on events that impact their community? So it's really important to go in with a flexibility and an adaptability. I have learned so much as I've gone along, and I think fondly back on my earlier days where oh, I made choices that I can't even justify now. We used to
Mm.
have like it used to be so important to me to have 10 storytellers in one night, and now I think like that is a hostage situation, and I don't know why I did that, or don't even remember like why were we there so long. So like know what you're trying to do, but be adaptable to like if things aren't working out, don't be afraid to just change it, you know.
Mm.
I've made so many changes to the show where like it used to just be like, oh, just show up and tell a story, cool. You know. And then we after it was actually I can tell you exactly what happened when I changed my processes. It was the show that I lovingly refer to as the Dead Dog Show. It was not supposed to be a show about dead dogs, but that's what it turned out to be. And I was just like, okay, I am being way too casual here. Like, I really need to shore it up. But also you just know, you know, you can't control the response that you get. You put it out there and hope for the best. I mean, a lot of people left that show depressed that night,
Mm.
as did I. But you know, take it as a learning point. You know, like okay, that did not do what I wanted it to do. What do I need to do differently? So for as much as that show was painful, it was a vital turning point, I think.
Mm. Yeah. And then when it comes to the logistical side, finding venues, working with other people, any advice on folks that are thinking about putting on events in their community?
Yeah, so with venues, you'll definitely just look around, shop around for what's out there. There are places that might do it for free, you know, but you also want to make sure that it fits your needs. The very first show we did, they gave us a slice of the room, but then like everybody on the other side of the room was talking,
Mm.
which it's really hard to get vulnerable when you feel like, but I mean, when you can hear people not listening to you over there. So yeah, just have a list of everything you need and make sure it's covered. And even like if somebody says, yeah, I have a microphone, you know, make sure it's the kind of microphone you need.
Yeah.
um, yeah, there have been a few like moments of like, oh, I was not expecting that to be that. Then again, you just on the fly, just figure it out. Um, don't let logistical things discourage you because, you know, again, like, or even just referring back to the, you know, this depressing show that I did, even though people were depressed, they came back,
Yeah.
you know, so
Yeah. And I think there's also like storytelling doesn't always need to be uplifting and that there's like a happy bow on it. Like life isn't that way. And so sometimes you do have the equivalent of the dead dog show in life, and knowing that other people are grieving can be a positive thing also.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. In the context of the show, though, their balance is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, KB, the last question I always ask is if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
you know, I've really drilled into the Sonder effect. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of it, but I couldn't explain it.
Yeah, so Sonder is basically this concept of when you're going through life and you just one day you recognize that like every single person who enters your sphere, even randomly, even just a passerby, like we all have complicated and complex lives. You know, we don't often think about that, you know, where it's like, oh, that person gave me the finger when he drove past me, you know, but then it's like to take a step back and be like, that person's probably having a bad day.
Mm.
And I just, it comes through in storytelling so much that I wish like everybody would just keep that in mind. You know,
Mm.
having interacted with so many people's stories over the years has really improved my ability to give grace to people who might
Mm.
disappoint me or, you know, do something that I don't necessarily like. So yeah, Sonder.
I
I
love
think
that.
everybody should be aware of it and embrace it.
I love that so much. The more we hear people's stories, the easier it is to give them grace. Love that so much. Well, Kabie, if people want to connect with Hearsay, if they want to learn more about what you do, follow you, where should we send them?
Well, for one thing, I would like to point out that I spelled hearsay creatively. So I would say hearsay storytelling, but do know it's spelled HERESAY. Rather than the actual correct spelling of the word hearsay. So hearsaystorytelling.com. We have a podcast that's available anywhere where you get your podcasts. The podcast is all like stories from past shows. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. And anyone can email me directly, kabie@hearsaystorytelling.com.
So awesome. We'll have links in the show notes as well. Kabie, thank you so much for being a part of this community and all the work that you're doing and for being on the show.
Oh, thank you. I love talking about storytelling. I'll take any opportunity to do so.
You know, in doing shows like this, it's just so awesome to connect with local people as well as people that are nationwide. There's so much local talent here in Traverse City that it really makes me excited about us putting on the group practice conference here in May. So hopefully you are on the wait list for that when tickets open up later this month. So if you haven't, that's over at practiceofthepractice.com/conference. All of those talks are limited to 20 minutes. It's like the TED Talk of the group counseling, group practice world. So make sure you're on that wait list. You know, some things from today is, you know, thinking about like who you are and what you want as part of your storytelling. She talked about the story circle of like normal, flip, and then the new normal, and even just flipping the order of some sentences being really important. And just that idea of like, would you explain it this way if we were at a diner counter? So super just awesome show today. You know, we couldn't do it without our sponsors. Today's sponsor is Headway. They work with therapy, psychiatric, and hybrid groups. There's no subscription fees, and they just support you to run the practice really easily. And they're trusted by thousands of group practice leaders just like you to simplify their administrative insurance, simplify your insurance admin. Sorry. If you want to learn more, head on over to join.headway.co/Joe. That's join.headway.co/Joe. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.